Dear Ms. Farrell and Councilor Green, I will not be in attendance for tonight's joint special meeting as a result of a conflict of interest pertaining to my proximity to a property on the liabilities to assets program proposal. I must therefore recuse myself from this meeting. Best regards, Mike Kuzmarek, Fitchburg City Council President. So we appreciate him doing that. And we will begin with, Attorney Pusateri, hello. You will go over the schedule that we're going to follow. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will first begin by having a presentation from Kate Casa of New View Communities. She's going to explain to us the basics of what the statutory requirements are for this application. In essence, I think you'll learn from that this is a statutory prerequisite to us filing and becoming part of this group of communities that's going to be able to take advantage of this program. So I don't want to make light of this meeting. Having this meeting is simply a statutory prerequisite for us to make an application. Then we are going to open up the evening for public comment. Members of the public will be allowed to have 2 minutes, as we ordinarily do, for a city council meeting. And Liz Murphy from our community development will read any comments that she's received and relay to us any oral conversations that she's had, so that you'll have the full benefit of what the planning department has heard and learned as they have gone through this process. After that point, public comment period will be closed, and then the question and answer period will begin for both the city councilors and planning board members jointly. Tonight we're going to be following strictly Robert's Rules of Order, which will allow members of this joint committee to speak twice. So if you have issues that you'd like to address, certainly have the opportunity to say what it is that's on your mind. If there's a rebuttal to your point, you'll have an opportunity to speak one more time after that. At the close of the question and answer, as you'll see, Liz Murphy will help us identify any proposed amendments that we've heard during the process of during the hearing. We already are anticipating some amendments to the application. I think her helping us with that will help focus our attention on what properties specifically we're going to make amendments to. And then the chair will call for a motion to adopt the amendments, and as you'll see from the schedule, then we'll be asked to make a motion and findings that the application is consistent with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 121A, Section 6. Again, you'll have a presentation on exactly what that is, and if there are questions, I'll be available to answer those questions. Then at that point in time, it'll be a little unorthodox, but the planning department will then take over the matter. They're going to adopt a amended application, and then they're going to formulate a report and vote that it be reduced to writing. I'm sorry, the planning board. What did I say? Department. Okay, the planning board itself. Thank you. And then we're going to recess, because we actually are going to take a couple of minutes and finalize the written report, which is 90% done. We expect it's going to be a very brief recess. We're going to reconvene, and then the matter will be before City Council, and the City Council will vote to accept the planning board report and forward the matter to the mayor with the instruction that the application be filed. So we're going to try to stay focused and on track with these events, and if there's any questions, I'm available during the course of the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now have the presentation by Kate Casa, New Views Community. Hello, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, and Planning Board members for inviting me here tonight. My name is Kate Casa, and I am working with New View Communities to help them move this project forward, and the 5 municipalities, including Fitchburg. The Liabilities to Asset program is a pilot program, brand new, and really it was launched in response to concerns that this part of this region of Massachusetts, North Central, expressed to the Baker administration, who was looking to provide some help on housing issues in this region. And folks explained to them that the issues here were different than what they are in Boston. The issues here revolved around vacant, abandoned properties. The issues here revolved around the market and foreclosure issues. And it's sort of out of those discussions with the 5 municipalities that are participating, including Fitchburg, of course, and Newview Communities, that this program was launched through DHCD, the Department of Communities and Housing, the state level. Newview Communities is a preservation program, really. It's a neighborhood stabilization effort. It's an opportunity to target 1- and 2-family properties that are vacant, abandoned, an eyesore in your community that you'd like to see renovated, and have somebody buy it who's going to be an owner-occupant. Anybody who buys the property, a newly renovated property, will have to agree to live in the property for 7 years. So Newview has formed a single entity nonprofit organization with 10 board members. There's a representative from each of the communities that are participating: Athol, Gardner, Leominster, Fitchburg, and Clinton, and and Newview community representatives. And together, the board will purchase, renovate, and sell properties to income-eligible purchasers. Folks will be have to be 110% of median income, so that's a little bit above the average income in the Fitchburg area. They won't be able to exceed that. So that's kind of the income targeting. Newview the Newview liabilities to assets program will only renovate properties in Fitchburg that are nominated by the Fitchburg representative. There will be properties that you've decided you'd like to see turned around, and those will be the properties that will be considered and worked on. We expect to do about 30 properties over 3 to 5 years. Could be more, might be more like 30 to 40 properties over 3 to 5 years, depending on what they cost and what the renovations are and what we can sell them for. Any proceeds that are made through the sale will go back into the fund to do more properties. We think we'll do about 5 properties, or we hope to do about 5 properties per year. The state is looking to, I mentioned it's really a neighborhood stabilization program, so the state has asked each municipality to target properties that are in a half-a-mile radius of each other, so that there'll be an impact on that neighborhood if those properties in fact do get developed. And Fitchburg has 2 different target areas that you have put forth. The Chapter 121A program provides 2 vehicles that are somewhat unique. One is that it is an opportunity to use what's known as a eminent domain taking. So it is possible that if you have a property in your community that you have had difficulty having any kind of sales for, we think probably, maybe a property that has an unclear title, that is just, maybe bank owned. It's kind of a mess, and it's one of the reasons nobody has purchased the property. It's an opportunity to use that tool to clear the title and to buy the property. We really see it. It's a tool to help, address some of the issues with problem properties. It's not a hammer. It's a tool. And so it would only be used in the event that Fitchburg decided that this is the property that you want to develop, and it makes sense in this case. Any eminent domain proceedings would have to be also approved by the by DHCD at the state level. And in addition, the person who owned that property would have to be offered fair market value, and we'd have to get at least 2 appraisals. And it's really quite a long process to see that through. So the eminent domain is one of the, a piece of a tool in our kit to move some of these difficult properties. Another tool in the kit, this is really just part of what 121A is, and so we'll be using it in this program as well. And what it is it's a payment, an excise. It will, while the properties are under development, it will allow the properties to only pay an excise tax instead of real estate taxes. And that will be worked through with the assessor, and we've already approached the assessors in each community. There'll be a contract. It will be for 1 year. It will be while the property is under development. The excise payment will go to the state, and then it will come back to Fitchburg. And it will, once the property is sold to the homeowner, that person will pay real estate taxes based on the assessed value. So it's a 1-year opportunity, I guess. I guess the only thing else I wanted to mention is that there's a lot of properties on the list. And the reason for that is that we won't be able to add any other properties to the list without another public hearing. So the idea was to cast the net wide. And that's what we've done here. It's very easy to take a property off at the point that Fitchburg decides you'd like to remove a property. We just have to send a notification to the state. So there's no problem there. We expect DHCD to have about $2.5 million to fund the project going forward. But of course, we're waiting for the hearing process to be over for municipalities to decide how they want to go forward, and then that process would kick in. But we've been working very closely with them. So maybe I'll pause and see if you have questions or.
We'll take public comment first.
Okay.
Okay. And we do have there was a list of people that were willing to speak. So I don't know if you want to join the audience, and then as questions about these properties come up, if we've got members here who know the answer or have the questions, we can certainly hear from the department heads at that point.
Okay.
Okay.
However you'd like to proceed.
Okay. Chris Watson.
I'm gonna go sit over there.
Yes, right at the.
You're funny.
Or if you could speak loudly. Yes.
I was just curious about 2 properties on this list, if they're still there, J Street, Garnett Street.
They
Are they
are
still on
still
the
on the list, yes.
Still on the list,
They are still on the
with
list.
somebody already working on it, that's already bought them.
As far as we know, they're still vacant, but it is a moving
They're vacant, yes, but
target.
there's somebody working very hard on
Yeah.
the Garnett Street property.
They haven't come to us to say anything. We can take them off the list.
And I'm just curious as to how you decide that they're not gonna be drug houses, or, there's so many cars up there, how they're gonna park? You guys can't just squeeze all these cars on there, on this street.
Just ask.
Can I address this directly? So, this was the first I've heard of those 2 properties. We had a similar 58 Mount Globe. Carol and her husband Mike, I'm forgetting the last name. It was one of a few different properties where a similar situation was brought to our attention, where work was being done on a property and it wasn't occupied, but building permits were pulled, money was being invested, and at least with that particular property, I gave assurances to the property owner. The day a certificate of occupancy is issued by the building department, give our office a call, and we'll work with, call the state and immediately have that property removed from the list. And I think our ultimate goal is not to purchase and renovate as many homes as we can. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that our vacant houses in Fitchburg are occupied. And so whatever means to which we can do that is the way we'd like to see things happen. And the developments that, if you were to take those 2 properties and they remain vacant for a period of 3 years, and we decided.
They have been, yeah, well, they have been
And,
already.
and so if those were properties that would be worked on, it would actually be worked on through a subcontractor, working with New View Communities Liabilities to Assets Corporation, that would turn it into a homeownership opportunity for a qualified individual who can afford to own a home and can really be a true asset to the community, and a homeowner who has a real stake in the neighborhood. So I think with those properties, we hope those would be great examples of the ability of homeownership to help transform some of our neighborhoods. And that's really the ultimate goal of the program.
So it doesn't matter to you whether there's parking up there, or, you know, you're just gonna sell these properties and let people, you're not gonna tell them that they have to bring their trash down the street to get picked up?
I suppose it's just as similar with any property throughout the city. If people want to redevelop them, they have to go to the building commissioner. The building commissioner then gives them a letter of zoning determination that tells them if they do or do not qualify under current zoning, and if they do not, whether they need to go to the planning board or the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then those decisions for these properties would be made just as though they would for any other property that folks are looking to invest in the city. So it isn't a case of we're just letting any and all development happen, but it would be done so in a way that would respect the plans that we have in place for the development in Fitchburg and would respect quality of life of Fitchburg residents. And that's
So if I
really-
wanted to buy it, you wouldn't disclose to me that, you know, I have no parking up there, they don't plow the street, and I have to bring my trash down the street to get picked up. You wouldn't disclose any of that information to somebody that's gonna buy that house. You're gonna develop it, and then how are you gonna get somebody to buy it with those restrictions?
I'm gonna be honest with you,
You don't know.
I think it
Exactly.
really depends on the specifics of a property.
Yeah, you don't know. Good luck.
Good point.
No, not yet.
So Helen O'Brien, I just would like to remind folks, please come to the front table, and Ken Page, and if you can address your comments to your chairperson, and then we would coordinate that with the person who might know the answers to the question. So the next person or people on the list would be Helen O'Brien and Ken Page.
Good evening, Ms. Brian.
Hello. I've already spoken with Liz Martin, and I was talking to Tom a little while ago. Our concern was our home that we live in is on the list. And it came as quite a shock because we didn't get the mailing that said there was a public hearing. Our neighbor actually told us and said, "Are you going to the hearing?" And that's kind of how we found out about it. So I feel much better since having talked to Liz Martin and then Tom. I just want to know understand what the process is and what's going on and how it's going to impact my community and what's going to be better about my community and be sure that my house is safe.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm sorry.
54 Mount Globe Street, yes. And Liz and/or Tom, can you explain why a property that was occupied ended up on the list, or the process on how we go about then removing her from the list, where we can't add, but we can remove, how we go about that so that she's assured that that somebody isn't going to come into her house and start renovating
It's
it?
actually a two-family home, so it's 5254 Mount Globe.
So there were 3 properties that Liz will be mentioning that we heard from homeowners who are currently occupying the property, and we weren't aware of that. So basically what we tried to do, and as Kate had mentioned, we tried to build a pretty long list of properties, and that meant we used a variety of different measures by which we identified a property as vacant. Property inventory surveys, we looked at water shutoffs, we looked at foreclosure notices, and in a case such as this, it could have been a case of just a simple oversight. Maybe when the property inventory survey was done, you all were on vacation and your mail was out. It could have been something as simple as that, and that's really the reason we're sending out notices and making sure folks are aware of the program. And ultimately, at the end of the day, just like to stress, not only locally, we have to nominate properties, and we would never nominate one that is occupied, and the state would ultimately need to verify a property as being vacant. And if it was both locally and state vetted, we would hope to avoid these problems. And in this case, we spoke with Helen about it a few weeks back. We have it on one of 3 properties that we'll be proposing to you, Liz, in just a moment to remove from the list.
Okay. Next on the list, Corey and Alyssa Skidmore, owners of 29 Goodwin Street, but they reside at 50 Emerson Hill Road in New Ipswich, New Hampshire. Hi there.
Hello. I just had a couple of questions. I was curious with the large list of properties and with mentioning that you're looking to do maybe 5 properties per year across multiple different cities and towns, what are you using for selection criteria to decide which to go forward with?
Selection, right, so she's asking about the selection process on how the properties were chosen, and then which of those chosen properties will be the ones that are first rehabbed.
So we actually did, we have some compiled lists of properties that we understood to be vacant and blighting from a variety of means. And we mapped them all and looked for where the concentrations were. And we saw two concentrations, one in the north of Maine and one in the lower part of South Street. And so that's how we came up with those two areas to target. And then beyond that, we'd be looking at a number of factors. And we've already started doing some of that, just driving around the neighborhoods again, looking for the homes that might have the most impact, homes that are potentially the most problematic to get into the market, like if we know that there is an unclear title and it's just going to continue to sit there because the bank may have made some errors in foreclosure and they're not prepared to restart the whole foreclosure process, so it's just sitting, or perhaps it's a property that an owner has passed away and the heirs have been unreachable. And those ones are the most challenging for those neighborhoods, and in some cases it might be an owner that we can contact, but it's blighting for that neighborhood, and taking care of that particular property is gonna have such a big impact. So that's what our hope is, to decide which properties we're gonna start with. And it's a bit of a moving target as the market is moving and properties are being purchased. We started this process of surveying the properties back in January, and a lot has changed since then. So that's why you're hearing people say, I live in this property, with the exception of Knoxville Street, which we misidentified. So does that answer your question?
Alyssa, is your property occupied at 29 Goodwin Street?
It is.
Okay.
Not by us, though.
Say that again.
So it is, just not by us.
Okay, right, but you've got tenants at that location.
We have, family or friends who are staying there.
The property is occupied.
Property
Sorry, I
is
didn't want to put,
occupied, yes.
okay, the property is occupied.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or concerns? Do you have,
Oh,
no.
sorry, he was,
Counselor Bushman, no.
I want to ask a question. When they come up, do they tell us the address? I can't hear the addresses.
29
I heard
Goodwin
that.
Street, okay,
Prior one I didn't hear.
okay. The prior one was 54 Mount Globe Street.
Yeah, I know that one. But the one, the lady over here was talking,
J and Garnett Street.
Jay and Garnett.
Okay.
just the only other question I had was whether or not there's definitely properties from Fitchburg that are going to go forward, or if this may be a case where you're concentrating on Athol first, or another town, and may not even get back to Fitchburg for a number of years.
Right. And again, I would refer this to Kate, but again, my understanding is that if we are successful, you know what I mean, in this pilot program, that the other communities may follow our lead on how to do it successfully. Kate, do you have anything else to add to that?
Just that I know that I think everybody who's participating in the program and the state would love to see properties done in all the communities. That's gonna be challenging, and I suspect we'll do, in the first year, it's likely we'll do, maybe a couple in Fitchburg, very likely. But that hasn't been determined as yet, and, the big goal is to make sure that we're working in all the communities to the degree that we can.
Good?
Yeah.
Okay,
That was all.
thank you. Are there any other members of the audience that would like to come up and speak?
Is there any concerns regarding
Um,
479 Milk Street?
There was a concern raised about the property at 479 Milk Street. Paul, you got that 479 Milk?
Yes, you
Okay,
do.
all right. So Liz or Tom, or I didn't know if you wanted to take a stab at that?
I don't understand the nature of the concern. Do we have any
The-
details?
There may be, it was suspect that there may be an oil tank on that property, a buried oil tank on that property. So they were looking for clarification whether that in fact, if there was an oil tank there, if the property was soil condemned, you know, one of our, is it now a brownfield? I mean, Milk Street's a nice neighborhood, that's my ward. It's a nice house, it's a nice property, and the fact that it has been foreclosed and sat vacant for a long time is worrisome to the neighbors and also worrisome to, you know, anybody who may pick this property up and not have the full details. So I just didn't know if you had heard anything or if there was anything that we can, it's a concern.
I haven't heard anything. I would say the properties that might raise these kind of concerns to keep it out of the market are the ones that if we can tackle, we want to, because we know the market's not gonna take care of that. So, I don't know if there's an underground tank. I wouldn't say it would preclude the program from working with that property,
Okay.
but I can't say for certain.
And I would add, you know, when these sales are made on the properties, if and when we decided to nominate and go through the purchase there, we would do our due diligence there like any potential buyer would of any site. So I think it's something to be mindful of, and of course, if anyone else has any other insights on any of these properties, but I'm sure it's something the team would be looking at and would be an important component of the decision-making process.
Okay, thank you. No other members from the audience would like to speak or have a concern? Okay, hearing none, we'll hear from Liz Murphy, Community Development. Any comments received in writing, and report any oral comments received as well.
Thank you. I did speak with 3 property owners in the last couple of weeks since the notice came out. The first was Helen O'Brien, and I think she represented what her issue is. So, you know, we would like that property to be removed from the list. I'm sorry, that is 52-54 Mount Globe Street. The second property owner I spoke to is John Dupree, and he owns 30 Ryfield Road. He doesn't currently live there, but he explained that he has completed exterior rehab, is closing on the financing for his interior rehab work to begin, which should be this week, and that he intends to occupy the property. He didn't specifically request that we take the property off. We could take it off now. We could remove it via a letter later if we choose to do that. And then the third property owner was John Vangos, if I'm saying that correctly. And he is the owner of 67 South Street and reported that he's occupying the property. So we would like that one removed. And there was one public comment by email that came to the city clerk's office. And it is from Sharon Centrano of 96 Birch Street in Fitchburg. And she writes, "Dear Anna Farrell, I am writing in support of the New View Liabilities to Assets application to acquire deteriorating properties that have been vacant for 3 years. Any of those properties present health and safety risks, negatively affect property values, and contribute to blight. My husband and I own 2 properties on Birch Street in Fitchburg, one of which abuts the 108 Birch Street property, which may be acquired by New View. I have researched New View and agree with their mission. I support their proposal. Sincerely, Sharon Centrano, 96 Birch Street, Fitchburg." Thank you.
I have a question on that. So are we removing 96 Birch or 108 Birch, or we're not removing?
We're not, based on this, she's not asking for any property to be removed. She is just showing her support for the program.
Okay, and are we removing 29 Goodwin Street,
What we're gonna do
or,
is we're gonna,
If that property is occupied, I think that's what I heard, that property is occupied.
do a question and answer, and then towards the end of that,
Okay.
we'll request Liz
Okay.
to give us an advice.
We can remove it at a later date, should you indicate that, or, I mean, we'd be speaking to you if we were looking to do something.
You're gonna take comments from council, is the question.
Okay, we'll now move to comments and questions from the council, and I'm going to go right around, starting with Counselor Walsh, and then we're just going to go up the line. If you don't have any questions, then
Yeah, the only question I had was the criteria that they use to select it, and that question's been asked, so I would
Right.
defer to.
I do just want to make sure that we have closed the public hearing portion.
We have not
Well,
closed the public
I'm
hearing.
sorry, the public comment portion of the meeting. Thank you.
I'm
Counselor
all
Clark,
set.
any
Thank you.
comments?
No.
That address on Milk Street is familiar, and it kind of brings it home a little bit. So I can kind of look at that right now and see where this program may really work out well. So I'd be in favor of it.
Mr. Hurley?
Mr. Hurley?
It was mentioned earlier that eminent domain may be used to clear a title. When Fitchburg decides that this is the property they want to see developed, who is Fitchburg? Is it the planning department? Is it the building commissioner? Who would make that decision?
That's a great question. So the city of Fitchburg has a representative to serve on the liabilities to asset board. That representative is Liz Murphy. So ultimately, Liz will be working under my direction and the mayor's direction. And again, to the point of eminent domain, it's really used as a tool of last resort. I think the vast majority, if not all, we hope, of these properties will be purchased through a negotiated sale with a willing property owner. And, you know, it's really done in a case where there's a messy title, or we have bank-owned properties that I've heard certain counselors on in this building talk about, where banks ignore property and we don't have any recourse. And this is really a new tool in our toolbox to help work with properties like that. But again, a tool of last resort in that case.
And we're making this list as extensive as we can, it seems. The list was developed by the planning department, and we're finding out tonight that there are several homes on the list that are occupied. Have these houses that are on the inventory list been visited recently? All of them?
The majority of the site survey work was done in the winter. So things have changed.
It's been 9 months?
So, right, correct. It's been a while, and during that time, because the list was so extensive, we did then do some title searching in June to try to understand if things were sold, and then whether they filed a homestead, you know, to indicate that they're actually living there, and a few came off as a result of that. And then we did a more recent walkthrough. We didn't get to the south, but we got to the north of Maine area. But that was after the application was submitted, where we were just taking a closer look at which properties might we want to start with. So every property was visited, but it has been some time in some cases, yes.
Counselor Caddy?
How many years is this program?
The funding would be for 3 years initially, but any proceeds from the sales would go into a revolving fund. So we expect at least an additional 4th year out of the
To
program.
extend it from the sales?
Correct.
So my guess is that the repair or reconstruction of these properties, the monies that are spent would not be recouped. In other words, you spend $200,000 on a home, but you're gonna get $155,000 for the sale. But that's the object of the grant. Do we have the funds for all the properties listed? I mean, what's the catch here? What's in that bank account? You said 2 to 5 properties a year, but what's the budget? What's the spending?
Right, so it's 2 to 5 properties a year 5 properties a year for the whole region, right? So there are 5 cities involved: Fitchburg, Leominster, Clinton, Gardner, Athol. And, you know, depending on what other communities might nominate, ours is a city with a higher population density. Conceivably, you would think we have more houses to offer. And as a result, we may get a higher percentage over time. but we're looking at a yearly budget of 2.5
2.5
million for a period of,
Unofficially at this point.
and that still needs to be
When you say we, Fitchburg,
the region.
the region.
And then, again, keep in mind, this is really intended to be a pilot project because we've been working in Newview, particularly with the Baker administration, for years now, because we have a lot of programs in place for larger housing production, not so many for the smaller scale vacant homes that we often see as issues in our neighborhoods. So the idea is here to show that a pilot like this might work, and who knows, it could be something they might be willing to extend over time. That's certainly not a discussion we've had with them, but that is the ultimate goal of a pilot.
Properties on this list, I know most of them, but I don't know all of them. Let's say one of the properties is in a very densely populated street with absolutely no parking. What criteria do you use to not develop a property when, so parking would be one thing, but I heard a woman talk about,
Trash.
what was the street?
Trash, yeah.
Yeah, the trash issue, like,
Street, they bring it right down
what,
to the
what's the
bottom of the
checklist? What reason, I mean, there should be reasons not to develop one of these properties and just put them on the demolition list. Have you got that far in this to make that list?
We don't have a checklist produced, but I can tell you that as developers, Newview is fairly well versed, and they understand that they might need to go in front of planning board or the zoning board of appeals at certain times, and they're going to have to follow what is required of them. So they'll be doing their due diligence in advance, and they're not going to touch a property that they really shouldn't be developing because it has no parking, and the city is going to say you can't develop this because it has no parking. So, for that reason, J Street may not be developed if it has no parking and there isn't an alternative found. And so that might end up there might be a different tool to try to address J Street,
knock it down on
not
the
this
island.
program.
So just one more, I heard some people speak today, and it's not tonight not that I don't believe them, but some people came in here and said these residents are occupied. That needs to be verified, like immediately. Are they occupied? Just
Nope.
because someone says they are doesn't mean they are. So I hope that you, in your endeavors, you explore that little piece.
Well, like the example that I had mentioned earlier, where they said work was being done on the property, they hoped to occupy it soon, to which we said, once you provide a certificate of occupancy.
That was South Street?
No,
On Mount Globe. And the homeowners, I think, the property owners well understood that you've got to occupy the property in order to, and show evidence of it, in order to have yourself removed from the list. So, point taken.
Thank you. I'm good, thank you.
Counselor Zarella?
So I know I've talked with you about this at fair length, but for the peace of mind of the lady who raised a very valid point, we just talked about what Newview will do before they purchase the property. If on the back end, after renovation has been done and whatnot, there are any additional permitting processes that need to be gone through by the purchaser, those will all be disclosed to them up front before they purchase. Correct? Since your office knows that whole process and can walk them through it.
That would be the goal. Yes.
Excellent, because as I've discussed with you at length, that's the biggest issue we see on the zoning board is someone coming to us and saying, we've bought this property already. We didn't know we needed all this stuff. Now we're going to be in the hole because we have to do all these things that we didn't know we were going to have to do. But you know all those processes, so no one's going to be blindsided through this program.
Thank you. Counselor Boishman?
So you're telling me we got 5 communities, we got $2.5 million, they're gonna do 5 houses a year. Fitchburg has 32 houses on the list, Founder's got 13, Leominster's got 7, Clinton's got 11, so we get a total of 92 houses. You're telling me that a board is gonna decide which houses and which communities they're gonna work in? That's what you're saying to me right now, right? That's the way I understood it.
Correct.
Okay, that's number one. I don't mind that issue there, but I find it very hard when I hear that, because we might go with Leominster, they only get 7 houses versus Fitzroy, who has 32 houses, or Garner, who has 13, or Clinton, who has 11, and vice versa. And the areas that Council Donnelly and I took a ride around, and we went to see all these houses, I really don't want any of those houses on that list removed, to be honest with you, because you meet the criteria of what this whole program's doing. Blight and overgrowth, and a lot of these houses have the blight and they have the overgrowth. And as the party that was sitting in the car couldn't believe there was another party in the car sitting with us in the car, and she was embarrassed of our city, embarrassed of the way it looked. And I'm not trying to be Mr. Negative, but we have a beautiful city. If we took good care of it, we can make it even better, even in the poor areas. I keep on saying that from day one since I got on this council. It makes a big difference, even though the houses are run down. If it's neat, it looks good. And I know I get excited and I talk very loud. But I don't mean to be rude to anybody out there. But we did take a ride around and we did see this. Now, the young lady over there says, you can't make more than, what is the median income in Fitchburg? Is it $50,000 a year?
Well, for a family of 4, and please don't quote me on this, but, I mean, or hold me to it, but, you know, it would be around 80,000, roughly speaking, for a family of 4. So that's the maximum that somebody could make to qualify to purchase
$80,000 a
the
year.
property. Yeah. Because the goal really is preservation, you know, neighborhood preservation.
And what's the least that you can make on this
Well, you
program?
have to be able to get a mortgage, you have to be able to afford the property. So
So
have
if
to
you
be
make
able to
about
get through the-
$40,000 a year, you can make a property, because if you're gonna renovate a property and you renovate into an area that's only worth $125,000, and you put 200, you're gonna just sell it for 125,000, aren't you?
Right. There'll be 2 factors to pricing. There'll be value, you know, what will the market bear? What can the property be sold for? And the maximum that a person who makes who's at 110% of median income. So there's 2 factors to pricing.
All right. Now, Tom, this is the planning department. That young lady brought up a good point. That J Street. If we develop that J Street and we spend money on that J Street, I think we ought to have our heads examined. Really. Because you can't drive up there in the winter. In the summertime, if it rains and you get a heavy rain down there, coming down the cobblestones, you're gonna slide down. Joe, you know that.
It's hilarious.
Cobblestone.
You ought to come watch.
Huh?
You ought to come watch. It's hilarious.
Counselor Boishman, we've got a bunch of
All right, I'm
people.
sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. All right. Mr. DePasquale.
Yes, so how long has this program been running, and have you done any homes yet?
The program can't begin until we finish this process and all 5 communities finish this process. So
All right.
it hasn't begun yet.
Okay, so, if we have 35 homes, I think you said something like that,
32.
32 homes, and you can do 5 homes a year, 5 communities, so 1 in Fitchburg, the math says that's 35 years, 34 years before you come and get to the houses. You know, so I don't know what happens to these homes if they're not being repaired. I mean, is there anybody that checks them, winterizes them, keeps them in good shape? If the roofs are gone and it's leaking, I mean, they're going to deteriorate more. So, you know, how do we go about keeping these houses so they can be improved later on? And second of all, if the houses are being done in our community in Fitchburg, do we get local contractors and put them to work in our community, or do we have outsiders come in and do the work?
To answer your last question first, if I may, we don't have, we won't engage directly with the contractors. New View Liabilities to Assets will, and they'll bid the project. Certainly, they will put that bid out locally and encourage local bidders. But ultimately, it's the lowest qualified bid that wins.
So then you have your own people that will look at a job, determine what needs to be done, and how it's gonna get done.
Well, yes, there will be a construction manager, rehab specialist that will be hired by Newview to prepare a scope of work, you know, to do a thorough inspection, a scope of work. Potentially an architect, I'm not. So a few properties might need a higher level of,
And my concern was
Design,
that
but-
these properties are not attended to, and it's gonna take a while to get to them. How do we keep them so that they don't deteriorate so much that they're not even fixable after?
and that's a tough one, because these are privately owned properties that have already been sitting in the market in blighted conditions and may already be in that position. But that's why they're not moving, and that's what this program is intended to do, is address those properties that aren't moving because they are so bad. This program can't work for every property, and 8J Street might be a good example of one that we might not proceed with, but we tried to cast the net as wide as we can to capture every possible property so that we have some choice when the time comes, because we know properties are gonna sell, some are gonna sell. We hope some sell, and that we don't have to address some of these with this program.
At the end of the day, this is another tool in the toolbox. We can't demo every property.
Right.
We can't purchase every property through this program, and we've got to get as many tools at our disposal to take care of the problems as they
I looked at some of the houses, pictures, and some of them really have great potential. Okay, now, those that do, we should keep an eye on them. Keep them so they can be repaired when we get to them, and not let them, get away from us. There should be some kind of idea done to keep these houses so that they can be repaired.
Thank you. Ms. Karen? Weird, right?
I don't really have any, most of my questions have been answered by the public comment at this time, so I don't have anything further to ask at this moment.
Thank you. I'll also just pass, and Mr. Fontaine.
Thank you. You said we theoretically could add properties later with a new public hearing. If we find a problem property that needs to be added, that's a possibility, correct?
It is, but all 5 communities have to do the public hearing process again.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, so it doesn't sound practical.
That's why we tried to cast the net as wide as we could.
Okay, so, and the other thing, it was just, I guess, a question for kind of towards Kate. She had mentioned at the beginning, she started by saying 1 and 2 family properties, and I know some of the other communities had 3s, 4s, and even an illegal 7. Is it only single and 2 family properties, or?
Well, that's a great question. The state is targeting 1 and 2 families. There are 3 families on the list, and I think it's fair to say that probably all of the municipalities would really like to see some 3 families go. The properties that, I know there's one that's 7, it's illegal, and the idea would be to turn it into something quite a bit smaller if that property was one that was selected to go forward.
Okay. And just one other question. You had said that there were no real estate taxes for 1 year. I think Kate said that. The 1 year period, that's a definitive fixed period, or was it, you're assuming it's 1 year that it's gonna take to renovate it, or is it the entire time that Newview owns the property?
That's a good question, and we expect it to be 1 year, and it's, the nuance of that will have to be worked out with the assessor of Fitchburg, if the property is in Fitchburg, because of the way that, I'm not an expert on real estate taxes, but, it's complicated when your year starts and when the property becomes on the, gets.
But is it a 1 year period in the ordinance? Is it a 1 year
I
period?
believe it's a 1 year contract.
Okay. That's all I was wondering. In the
Yes.
event that the property gets stuck in ownership for, one of the properties on here, 20 Taft is owned by the Housing Authority. It's been vacant for years, as far as I know. And, if that were a situation where, you take it from the Housing Authority to fix it and it's at the bottom of your list and you have it for 6 years, I just want to make sure that there was a cap on that time frame.
Can I just speak to that?
Sure, of course.
We wouldn't take any property until we were ready to proceed with a rehab too. So there isn't a purchase and hold intention here.
Okay. It's never an intention, though. That's why I asked the question.
Counselor Donley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on that,
Do you understand what percentage of the tax being waived would be compared to the cost?
I believe it's gonna be 5% of the purchase price that.
Well, just to go on the record, I'm not in favor of waiving the taxes. Everyone else pays the taxes. Just for this program, it's a very small percentage. And I don't think it's in the best interest of the city to be doing it. As the councilor said, we looked at 30 out of 32. And my rating system is as scientific as the one that was presented to us. I think there's 6 houses that are too good to be in a program. When we're trying to market the city, when you put income limits on programs, it just sends a stigma on the program, on the neighborhood, and on the people buying them. When you talked about Ryfield Road, you know, those houses are 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 up there. And you're gonna have a person that can barely afford a house, and you put it on the list? I don't think there was, I think a lot more homework could have been done for the list. The one on Milk Street. Very, very nice, stable neighborhood. You don't need someone who can barely afford a house to live in that neighborhood. And I know I sound a little sarcastic, a little bit bitter. It's interesting that the program is proposed and will be run by people who do not live in Fitchburg, but are telling us this is a good program for Fitchburg. To me, it sounds like there's going to be more of an employment program for New View or subsidiary. If you would clear the title, the private developer would buy the house and sell it at market rate. Houses aren't moving because the bank owns them or they can't get clear title. My question about eminent domain. From my understanding, eminent domain is a federal law, Mr. Pusateri, or is it a state law?
State law.
State law? I stand to be corrected. I know that if it's used as a tool and not a hammer, it can be successful. When it's used as a hammer, it can be successful at very great expense. I say we're trying to market Fitchburg's assets. When you're limiting incomes, it just creates a problem. So I said 6 were too good. The Milk Street, I heard about the oil tank too. That was a planned foreclosure, I guess. I considered 10 of the houses to be good for the program. I think 4 should be considered to be demolished, and 12 are questionable. And the one on J Street, I mean, that might have been good when everybody walked, but that's a dangerous street on a sandy, windy day, or on the leaves when they're blowing. I mean, that street is treacherous. That's kind of my evaluation of this. The comment was made about quality of life. I'd like to say quality of life compared to what? Because good neighborhoods, medium neighborhoods, and low-income neighborhoods, and then we have some of the rich communities that other people live in. Thank you.
Counselor Fleming.
Well, 2 of my questions have been asked and answered, but I did want to find out, did you say 80,000 would be the income for the medium, 110%? That would be for a family of 4?
That's the state's assessment of what 110%. It's rough. It's a rough number. It's probably slightly more than 80,000, but that's the state's assessment of what 110% of the area median income for a family of 4 is correct.
So as Mr. DePasquale said, will those properties, who will be monitoring to make sure those properties are being taken care of once they're purchased? Will there be a standard?
A monitoring program. That I don't know that that is built into the design of the program at this point. A monitoring, there is a restriction that would require the owners to live in the property for 7 years.
And that will be monitored.
Yeah, that will be monitored.
So they have to live in it, they have to be able to afford the mortgage, but they don't have to be able to keep it up, which could bring that property back down to where it was before you rehabbed it.
That's true, and that, I guess what I would say about that is that's like any market transaction is in that same situation.
Counselor Di Natale.
This is a state program per state law. So when I saw this meeting, I knew there were going to be some people who have justifiable concerns about the program and its merits. But once again, like any other state and federal program, where these wizards of smart on Beacon Hill in DC who know everything and know better than everybody else, they create these programs. And the cities and towns are left jumping for the carrots that they're throwing at us. So while I may not like some aspects of this program, and some of this does not settle well with me, especially in the instances where there is an owner of the property that we're trying to, get out of here, let's move. I have an issue with those properties, not the ones that are abandoned, not the ones where we can't find an owner, not the ones that the bank owns because the banks don't give a damn, and not ones where someone might have died and there's title issues. The ones that I have concerns with are the ones where someone owns the place and they're at least somewhat invested in it. And they tell us, yeah, sure, put it on the list. Because they don't have to do anything then. We'll do it. I have a problem with that, but I know that's part of the program. So that's the Wizards of Smart at Beacon Hill. I also don't like the fact that we're cherry-picking properties. That's what this is. We're using a criteria. It's a large swath of properties, but we've got counselors saying, I don't like this one and this one. The counselor's saying, why isn't this one on the list? You might as well put a dartboard up of all the bad properties in the city and throw it at the, throw it, because that's what it seems like to me. This is going to be a program where we have a big list, and then for some people, justifiably, it's not big enough, it's not including enough stuff. Some things should be on there, shouldn't be on there. It's another one of those things where we're not going to satisfy all, how many of us are there? There's 20 of us? Close to 20 of us? I mean, so I sit here and I go, when I have to vote on this, what am I voting on? I'm voting on proceeding with the list as amended. Is that what we're voting on?
Correct.
Okay.
In addition to any other amendments you may propose.
So my issue with the vote that I have to take is, I'm not crazy about some of these properties for reasons I already stated, but then I ask myself, do I really have a say in this? Because the state's going to tell us, you don't want to do this? We'll just give it to everybody else. And I know there are properties on this list that are legitimate, that we need to get off, we need to move forward on. But there's some that people have justifiable concerns, so I'm voting for the entire package, and I don't like the entire package. That's my dilemma right now. So I guess I'm putting my faith and trust in the subject matter experts from Newview and the Community Development Office to really vet this, because right off the bat, to me, there's not a great start in terms of there are people here saying, my house is on the list, I didn't know it was on the list, take my house off the list. That scares me. Because what will happen is these residents will justifiably start calling us. And I'll sit there like a deer in the headlights and go, I don't know what you're talking about. Because I don't know everything. But it's got, the stuff is going to get flung at us. So I want to make absolutely certain that you guys vet this through the nose before we submit anything. Because I don't want to run into a scenario where we get caught between a rock and a hard place, and it will be our fault if that happens. It's not the homeowner's fault or the occupier's fault. So I'm a little hesitant about this program, but for whatever concerns I have about the program are moot because I didn't create the program. None of us did. These are the geniuses at Beacon Hill that created this program. And we're abiding by their dictate, like everything else we get from them, carrots. So, you want the money, Fitchburg? You want it? You don't want it, we'll give it to somebody else. What do? Turn it away? But I have to accept the full list right now. That's not complete. That will go up, that will go down. I mean, is there going to be another vote later on after we solidify the list, or is this just a green light, you guys, to submit a list to the state once you go through the vetting process and clean things up on this list? I mean, are we ever going to get a final list, and are we then going to have another vote?
You'll be voting on the final list today, and ultimately sending out the public notices to abutters and the property owners was part of the vetting process, and the folks that came here today to mention that their properties were occupied, we had spoken to prior, a couple weeks prior when the initial notices went out. That was part of the vetting process, knowing full well that we're not perfect, and ultimately at the end of the day, when purchases are made, negotiations between willing parties, we're going to be looking and have to look ultimately at properties that are not occupied for both local and state level approval, and it's a responsibility we don't take lightly. But I appreciate the
I
concern.
don't disagree with you. It's a laborious process. And the fact that there's a significant list here that some have expressed displeasure with, this to me is a take it or leave it. It's everything on this list. We'll pare it down later, but there's not going to be any changes to this list. To me, if there are changes to this list, should we not have to vote again? Because to me, we're voting on this list.
Counselor Di Natale, we will have an opportunity after we're done with council questions and answers. Ms. Murphy will come back with a proposed amendment to the application, to the list.
Okay.
Then we will call for a motion to adopt the amendments.
I understood that. I'm saying, but what if there are people who aren't satisfied with the amendments? Do they stop at the amendments? My point is that whatever we decide tonight, that's it.
They can always be taken off.
I know they can be taken off. I'm talking about adders.
You can't add.
And add.
I know you can't add, but I'm saying there are people I'll say it for a third time. There are people in this room who have displeasure with the list. So it's either you like it or you don't. You can't cherry pick it. What we decide tonight, that's it. We're not going to have another vote on this. So,
I'm gonna move on to Mr. Capadopoulos.
okay, thank you.
I spent some time recently going over the list for 32 properties, and 2 or 3 jumped out at me as being great homes, homes that I would like to tackle myself, great-looking homes. But then again, on the other side of the coin, there were 2 or 3 agreeing with Councilor Boschman and Councilor Donnelly that I would hope that Newview looks at real closely. And if these homes have no reasonable parking or access problems, they just simply be removed from the list and not dealt with. Then I don't think they're really worth investing any money. The 3 that really jumped out at me that I'd like to see high on the list of spending money on and developing, because they have some kind of architectural or historical importance, are 30 Ryfield Road, 353 Blossom Street, and 80 South Street. I'm kind of happy to hear that 30 Ryfield Road is probably going to be taken off the list. I've had many conversations with the owner of that home. I know the owner is current on the taxes, and he's putting money and time into the home. That home has a lot of potential, and I think he will eventually develop it. The Blossom Street home is a gorgeous house, and the South Street house has a lot of historical importance. That was the home of Lovell Johnson. He ran the Ivor Johnson Arms and Cycle Works for many years. So I would hope that Newview gives those few properties that I mentioned, the ones that have a lot of historical and architectural importance, put them high on the list of properties that you might want to tackle first.
Thank you. Counselor Squalia.
So on talking about the properties on the list and which properties we should take off the list, does it actually benefit us to remove any of the properties from the list? Because if they are on the list, then we can, in the next 3 to 5 years, if the current occupants were to leave, vacate the property, or weren't renovating it for some reason and wanted to sell it so that we could renovate it, that would be an option if they were on the list, right? Is there any drawback to remaining on the list?
I would say no, there isn't a drawback to the property being on the list other than an owner who might live there feeling uncomfortable about the fact that their property is on the list. But we cannot proceed with an occupied property. It just, if we find out when the time comes that property is occupied, we would not attempt to purchase it.
And when you say occupied, do you mean occupied by the owner or someone just living in it that...
Anyone that is legally living there.
Legally occupying it.
Correct.
And so at this time, according to my notes, we have 2 properties that you'd like to remove from the list, 5254 Mount Globe and 67 South. And the other ones we're not removing from the list at this time.
But may end up removing via a
In the
written
future.
notice to each.
Okay. And for Kate, when it, on Mr. DePasquale's question on who will be renovating the properties, you know, when you select a contractor, will this be a bid for 5 properties all at once in the first year, or will this more be a bid of a contractor per property, or will this be a general contractor that will handle all subcontractors for the job?
Good question, really good question. I think we will proceed with a general contractor who will bring in subs. I think that we don't know, we don't know exactly how that's gonna work because we don't know the first 5 properties that are going to be selected. If they're spread out regionally, I don't know that it really makes sense to have one contractor. We have a very strong preference to also hire locally and to get good qualified bidders. So I think that will, you know, there's a couple of factors there that have to be weighed against each other. But I know that that's a priority.
Great, thank you. And so the purchaser has to remain in the property for 7 years. What are the penalty to if the purchaser, you know, gets foreclosed on or tries to sell the property or what have you?
So if they try to sell the property within the 7-year period, basically there's an amount of assistance that will be part of the, what they're gonna call a covenant that's attached. It's like a mortgage that's recorded, like a second mortgage almost. And the amount of assistance will be roughly, you know, the cost of acquisition and construction minus the sale, right? So if there's like it costs $25,000 more to redevelop than it sold for, $25,000 is that covenant amount, and it will burn off 1/7 each year. So if they sell it in year 5, then they have to pay back 2/7 of that. The foreclosure is a little more tricky. It would appear DHCD will have a right of first refusal to, if it's going to foreclose, to be able to buy that property. So if they choose to then resell it to somebody else that's qualified, they could do that. If they choose to not buy it, then the bank will continue the foreclosure. And a foreclosure generally wipes out any other restriction in mortgage that's in existence. So I don't think it could survive the foreclosure, which is why the right of first refusal will be there.
Okay, great. And are any of these properties more than a 2-family that you might expect, like a 3-family that you might expect to turn into a 2-family throughout the 5 communities? Are these only 2
I
families
think there are a
right now?
few in more of the other communities. Here,
There's a few 3 families on the list as well, and the intention being
turn
to
into two.
convert them.
Right.
Convert them to 2-family.
Because once you get to too many units, it's hard to manage as an owner occupant. Harder to manage.
And a 3-family might be higher on the priority list as they are hard to redevelop for contractors because they go into commercial code and require sprinkler systems perhaps and all of that.
That's correct. They can be at times very expensive to renovate because of the code requirements when you're getting into, you know, redeveloping more. It's more than half of the value.
Right.
If you're putting more than half of the value in, then you have to bring everything up to code.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now, Ms. Murphy, once again, we're going to put you on the spot. Do you have a list of the proposed amendments to the application that you would like to make?
Yeah, I would request that the joint planning board and council consider amending the plan to remove 52-54 Mount Globe and 67 South Street. There was a third 30 Ryfield Road, but I feel like if folks are comfortable with the idea that if this property gets renovated and is issued occupancy, that we then remove it via a letter at a later date.
And are there any counselors that have any other proposed amendments to this list?
I have a question about her amendment.
Yes.
You're asking that 2 properties be removed?
Yes, I'm asking that,
Along with that, we knew that this list was coming for this group, and several people have expressed that they have gone and visited all these 32. I visited several of them myself. But we're being told that some of these houses were not visited for more than a year. And along with that, before this list came to this group, did you bring that list to the building commissioner and ask him if any of those properties had pulled building permits?
we did not do that recently.
Thank you.
Counselor Caddy.
So this goes back to my question. You said you haven't visited these properties for 9 months.
Some of
Some of them. My question earlier was, because someone came here tonight and said they were occupied, does that mean they're occupied? I would suggest leaving them on the list, and then tomorrow morning, or this week, go visit the properties and make sure that that's the truth. Because you can always remove them, you've said that, you can always take them off the list, but there's no evidence here tonight saying anything's occupied. And it's not your fault, it's just the way things are.
And I guess I would say that's the council and planning board's decision to make whether you want to take up those amendments, but I certainly appreciate the comment.
Counselor Boishman. One
I'm
comment.
just going back to the contract, maybe you can answer it. I buy one of your properties 5 years down the road, the value of houses have gone way up, and I want to take the equity out of my house. Will I be allowed to take the equity out of my house and refinance that house?
Not for 5 years, well,
I still live in the house now.
yeah.
All I did was rewrite my mortgage and take, the house is now worth $200,000 and I bought it for $100,000. I want to take the equity out of my house. Can I do that underneath this program?
You know, it's a good question. I am hesitant to answer it because I'm not really sure how that will work out. There will be a covenant on the deed of the property, which might make it challenging for a bank to approve taking the equity out. It will affect the ability to pull all that equity out. So, and I'm not a lawyer, so I think that it would be complicated to do that. I'm not sure it could happen in the 5 years.
I'll go back to my original statement again. I'll ask you again on this program, and I brought it up to Boston when I called, and I think he mentioned it, I think she mentioned it, I think Council Donley mentioned it, Melissa, Council Fleming. The whole purpose of the program, the way I understand it, and the way I'm reading it, is to improve the neighborhoods, to bring stabilization and bring the quality of life up.
Counselor Boishman, does this have anything to do with a proposed amendment? That's where we're at. We're making.
Well, it's part of the question I want to ask. Can I ask these questions after, Ms. President?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll wait then. I'll wait.
Thank you. So, Counselor Zarella.
I just wanted to concur with Councillor Caddy, not because I doubt the veracity of the people who've spoken this evening, but simply because there's virtually no cost to leaving these on the list. They can be removed, as I understand it, very, very simply at the end of the week, if you want to. There's no cost to taking them off to leaving them on the list, not even to the residents themselves, because you can't do anything with them as long as someone's there. And so if there's no cost to leaving them on the list, but if we take them off the list and something, not necessarily with the lady who came here tonight, but with the other one, maybe something falls through, I don't know, then we can't put it back on the list. So my inclination would be to keep the list as is and remove properties afterwards through the process by letter, as they are verified as occupied or as the board that will be established sees fit to remove them.
Thank you. Counselor Fleming.
I'm not sure I
purchased.
Just quickly, are people able, what if somebody decides they're gonna move out of the city and they rent the home?
No.
How are you gonna monitor that?
There will be there'll be a deed restriction on the property. And if they wanna sell the property, they're gonna have to notify New View Communities and DHCD that they wanna sell. And they can sell. You know, some people are gonna have, you know, something happens, they have to sell. They have to either sell to somebody who is income eligible, and they'll have to pay back a portion of the equity, of their benefit that they receive.
But that wasn't my question. My question was,
Can they rent?
who's to say someone moves out of that house because they got transferred, and they choose to rent their home to somebody else? How is that going to be monitored?
Oh, how's it gonna be monitored?
Yes.
New View Communities is gonna monitor that.
How?
They typically will send something to the property. I don't know, you know, we haven't really set up exactly what that system will be, but there will be monitoring, and it is something that's done all over the state for properties that are renovated with DHCD money. It's an important requirement program, both from the state. I can get back to you with more detail on that. I'm not really sure exactly what they do, to be perfectly honest, but it will be done.
Mr. Fontaine?
Yeah, one question about taking them off the list. Obviously, this joint meeting today is setting what the list is. Can the board or New View unilaterally take them off the list without asking us if they can take it off the list?
Well, I mean, that's not how we really want to work. I mean, the idea.
No, I'm just saying, if you're ever going to take a property off the list, would the first step be to contact the council and the planning board, like we would for anything, for a recommendation, or?
No. We will be working with the mayor's representative, who is now,
Even though this joint board is the one that's creating the list, theoretically? It just seems right that you would contact the council and the planning board before you made those decisions to take any properties off the list.
Yep. I suppose, I guess to answer that question, I would prefer to err on the side of caution in terms of protecting individual property rights in this case. So if we did come across, for example, if a property, we got evidence that it was occupied, I would like to remove it tomorrow, as opposed to waiting for the next time that planning board and city council jointly convene, because the goal of this program is to not limit the rights of private property owners that are occupying their home.
That's certainly not the example I'm talking about. I'm talking about an example where New View, for whatever reason, or the board decides that property might not be, for a different reason, might not be in their best interest, either too costly or whatever else, to run it by the joint board to say, we're gonna take it off, it can never be, it can't be added again. Is it okay if we take it off?
And
Not in the issue of someone living there.
Right, I guess to that I would say, to Councilor Squalia's point before, it's really, if a property is vacant, there's no conceivable good reason in the best interest of the board to remove a property, because it gives us that flexibility to consider what might be the case 2-3 years down the line. Some of the properties Councilor Donnelly mentioned would be a great example. Maybe there are a few that, yeah, we think the market will take care of it tomorrow. That doesn't mean we're gonna remove it off the list, because what about 5 years from now if the market hasn't taken care of it? Maybe that's an opportunity for us to step in.
Okay.
Counselor Donley?
Thank you. We talked about waiving taxes. If these properties are purchased, will all the back taxes be paid?
No, there will be an excise tax that will be paid while the property is under development. And then when the property is sold to a owner occupant, the property will be assessed, and that person will pay, that homeowner will pay going forward the taxes.
So if the taxes haven't been paid for 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years, those are gonna be waived also?
That's not
That was my question.
You mean
A
if
back
there's
tax is going to be paid.
back taxes on a you mean taxes that, real estate taxes that haven't been paid currently?
Right.
I don't think I'm not aware that these properties have back taxes unpaid.
Well, they're certainly not far enough in the tax title process.
I'd be quite suspect if all the houses that are vacant like this have all their taxes paid currently. The other thing, quite often in these programs, the word stabilization is used quite frequently. If you have a ship that's sinking and you stabilize it, it doesn't go down anymore, and it doesn't come up either. Years ago, we had a housing improvement program. Meant they were going to improve the houses. But to date, I haven't seen anything called the neighborhood improvement program. I don't think stabilization is the right word. You're gonna make a change, it's gotta be an improvement, it can't just stay the same. It's not stabilization. Thank you.
All right. We are now ready to make a motion to adopt the amendments brought forward.
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Keys, keep your hand up.
Is this just a council vote? Or joint?
This is a joint vote.
You voted against, you make a motion, accept it?
1, 2, 3. Yeah. 4, 5, 6.
Zarella, Caddy, got it, 6. Okay. Well then,
Madam
Oh.
President, may I ask you a question? What are we voting on here? We voting on the things to take those
On
three
whether-
houses?
Yes, whether to take two of them off.
Two, all right. That's
right,
all I wanted to
so,
know.
okay, so there was a recommendation made to remove the properties, and as amended, we've just made the vote as amended.
Just the two.
Just the 2 houses removed from that list.
Oh, I'm gonna go
Okay.
with you guys then. I mean, sorry about that. I didn't know.
Okay, then do I have to call for this? Finding that the application,
So if we're
So we
lucky, we'll
did
get one
B.
house.
now we're on to C,
Yep. So we can make a motion.
okay?
Over 5 communities.
So, the next would be a motion making a finding that the application meets the criteria of MGL Chapter 121A, Section 6, and a vote will be taken. This is a joint body vote, and 10 votes are required to pass.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, and if you could raise your hand for that.
This is in favor.
This is in favor.
Okay, could you keep that,
Yep.
please?
They got strong arms.
It's a motion to make a finding of the application's
Did she get us?
There are more over there.
And Counselor Fleming also. So I think, are we not unanimous, correct?
Let's start over. People are going up and down.
Okay.
Sorry.
I've been working out. I can do this.
Your hand is up, Counselor Dina Talley?
Yes.
So I believe there's only one in opposition.
Only one.
In favor.
And this doesn't sound like it's in stone.
Right. No, it might be no property.
Okay. Do I have to bang the gavel to move on to planning? Okay.
I think you just
Ne-
did, yep.
Okay, so, motion passes, thank you. We now declare the matter to be before the planning board. So, Ms. Karen,
As the matter is now before the planning board acknowledges the declaration and calls for a motion and vote to accept the application as amended and consolidate the information into a report to be sent to the city council. So
I'll put that
after
in the form of motion.
Second.
motion's been made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Okay,
One opposed?
No, I made the motion. Good.
one opposed.
One opposed. Okay.
So at this time, we're going to take a brief recess at the hearing in order to print the report, and then we will resume after we print this report and actually submit it to the council.
And that's gonna be like quick, like 2 minutes. And planning board members, we're going to. We're not ready. Oh, I'm sorry, we're not ready. We will try this again. So, yeah, counselors and planning board members, please take your seats. And Ms. Karen will resume the hearing.
We have received the revised report, and we're going to declare the matter to go before the city council.
So I have a, what's that? We have a copy of the written report. Okay. And that will be on file at the city clerk's office. And then, Anna, will you be able to forward that to all of us?
I will.
Okay, thank you. So I need a motion and vote to accept the report of the planning board and forward to the mayor with the instructions to take any and all actions necessary and helpful to file the application. All those in favor?
Speaking to that,
Oh, asking for a motion to accept the report of the planning board and forward to the mayor with instructions to take. So, of course, yes.
So I think in the packet, Liz, did this get circulated in the packet with the petition?
What is that?
This is the.
Is that the report?
Yeah.
There was a draft version that was circulated via my email on Friday, and then that's the final version that's just been tweaked a little bit with an amendment, and language has been updated to, because we did things jointly instead of.
It was not circulated to city council.
It was circulated to city council via my email on Friday. The draft.
With a section that said this was amended to remove the following properties, in which case now we've added the two properties that you all agreed to amend to remove. Aside from that, the rest of it's the same.
Mr. Hurley.
So the planning board is voting to do something to a report that we haven't seen?
We already did. We're done. The
Just
council.
amended it.
No, yeah, we already did. It's
Who
the
did?
council now, the planning board. That's the vote we just took to approve this program with those two revisions. The planning board's done at this point. This is just the city council.
So Attorney
The
Prusa.
ordinary course, if I can I address
Yes,
the concern?
please.
I think the concern here is a legitimate concern. The ordinary course of events would be that the planning board would then convene itself. Then from the minutes, Mr. O'Hare would then prepare a written report based upon what had happened. And that report would then be circulated to city council, and then it would come into their, on their agenda, and it would come to their information packet. And in this particular case, that's not what happened. In this particular case, this report was already circulated to city council, and it was in your emails to supplement your packets. The additions that were made by Tom, and then he had it reprinted for us this evening. Unfortunately, we only have one copy. Perhaps if we were in Old City Hall.
Haven't even had those amendments read to us.
Okay. The other option that we have is to simply take this report and have Mr. O'Hara submit it to the city clerk's office, and the city council can reconvene on October 2nd and deal with the matter that way. The preferable mode for the city is to facilitate the program and not be the last city to approve the program, not be the last city of the 5 municipalities.
And it's really just a procedural question. You all voted that the project was in accordance with 121A, criteria 1 through 7. Once you made that vote approving it, then it's just a procedural matter to then submit a report from planning board to city council. Council submits that same report from city council to the mayor, right? So to mayor, or
And then the mayor will file the application.
to Councilor Di Natale's point of sometimes these laws can be a bit complicated and there might not be too much rhyme or reason or logic to it. This is the procedural matter in question. But again, you all really already approved the project itself. This is just a procedural question.
And if I could just follow up on Tom's comment briefly. As I indicated earlier, this is a statutory prerequisite to participate in the program and accept funds for the list of houses that we have on the list. And the 2 votes that you've already taken as a joint body is 100% consistent with the vote that we're asking City Council to take as an individual body at this particular point in time.
Would you be, again, if it comes to procedural, would it be proper procedure for us then to accept that report, knowing that we've vetted it the 2 times that we've taken the vote for it? Or would you prefer it to be submitted as it is to us as a council body for us to, I guess, vote on it again on October 2nd?
Well, I'm only going to ask that you accept the report, which I think we just took a vote, or we tried to, and then the next vote would be to have your own report and then have that sent to the mayor's office and then instructing him to file the application. Whether we do this tonight or whether you do this at the next meeting, I know that the planning department is very anxious to be completed with this process. We certainly don't want to be the last community of the 5 communities participating in this program to have that one remaining outstanding issue. So I think
Okay,
for
so
those
then I will ask then for the city council to make a motion to accept the report of the planning board. Thank you. All those in favor?
Speaking on the motion?
Yes, Councillor Squalia.
May I ask the city solicitor, because as we have a copy of the draft, I'm ready to vote on this now. I would just feel more comfortable voting on something that we have read or heard. If you would just simply read the first 2 amended paragraphs to the report, then we could feel comfortable voting on the report, I feel.
Where was the amendments? We took off.
Right. Good suggestion. Try to print one out for everybody. There's no paper back there. So starting at the second paragraph, it says, in consideration of the findings below, the joint body composed of members of the Fitchburg Planning Board and the Fitchburg City Council voted to approve the Chapter 121A application as amended, removing the following properties from the Fitchburg scope of the project: 5254 Mount Globe Street, 67 South Street. Planning Board member Paul Fontaine made the motion, seconded by Councilor Joe Caddy. The vote was approved by a vote of 15 for and 1 against. De Pasquale, Fontaine, Karen, Caddy, Boschman, Donnelly, Fleming, Zarella, Squalia, Walsh, Green, Clark, Di Natale, and Capadagli for. Hurley against. Pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 121A, Section 6, the Fitchburg Planning Board, after careful consideration of the evidence presented at the public hearing and after thorough review of the application submitted, makes the following findings relative to the project. Findings were made by a vote of 4 to 1. Motion made by Fontaine, seconded by De Pasquale. De Pasquale, Fontaine, Karen, and Capadagli for. Hurley against.
Okay, so I have a motion and second to accept the report of the planning board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. I now declare the hearing closed. We will have a very brief, another recess. I will go and get Councilor Kuzmarek, and we will start with regular city council meeting.
Thank you, Council.